Welcome to Pressure Points. Our topic is Apple earnings. And as of this recording, and the conference call ended about 15 minutes ago, shares of Apple are up about 3.5% in after hours. At one point, they were up almost 5%. So it's come off a little bit of its high, hit its peak about 10 minutes into the earnings call. Wasn't any particular moment or particular comment that caused that, call it percent and a half sell off. But overall, big picture, shares are up 3.5% here in after hours. And the reason is because the iPhone guide for the December quarter was much better than expected. And that is the pressure point. Going into this report, all eyes were on the iPhone. And the expectation was that they would comfortably beat the September quarter and then guide up for the December quarter. In fact, they missed the September quarter numbers. They reported 6% iPhone growth, and the whisper number was 10%. The in-print number was 9%. And but that miss was more than offset by the positive guidance for December. They guided to what they said double digits. So I think 12%, maybe even better iPhone growth for the December quarter. The street was at 6%. And so I want to dig a little bit deeper into kind of thinking about these two quarters and what's going on. And the what's going on piece is effectively their supply constrained. We saw this in the lead times. The lead times are running about 15% longer this year versus last year. And that is an indication that they're just having a hard time keeping up with demand. And so effectively they couldn't fulfill those orders in September. They get pushed into the December quarter. And if you think about the business, instead of looking at it on the September or December quarter, think about it as a 2-quarter period, just to kind of combine those 2 quarters. And if you take the approach that they would have met the whisper number for the September quarter, so that means they would have grown the iPhone by 10%, and they would have maintained 6% growth for the December quarter, effectively guided in line for December. If they would have done that, that implies about 124 billion in revenue. Now, if you take the approach that they miss the September quarter and deliver 6% year-over-year growth, which of course is what happened, and they do 12% growth in the December quarter, that equates to 126 billion in revenue. So it's just about 1.5% more revenue when you look kind of in aggregate in terms of how they guided up. Now, again, double digits could be 10, it could be 18%. We don't know. But my sense is that they collectively putting these two guides together, it was a positive and just a really good sign that we're off to a good start. I want to put a further point in terms of just kind of the trajectory, bigger picture, what's going on with the iPhone, is that over the past 2 quarters, and then factoring in the December quarter guide, they are going to grow iPhone by about 10% in each of those quarters. And that compares to iPhone growth over the previous 3 years, an average of down 0.5%. So we've seen a measurable step up. Now, part of that's because of the new cycle, but we saw some of that step up in the June quarter. And I think a big factor that's going into this is as simple as this big upgrade period that we had in 2021, iPhone growth up almost 40%. Typically, people hold on to their phones for 4 years. And if you rewind the tape and look at what I was saying a year ago, I was expecting last year to have been a big iPhone year. We didn't see that happening. But I think we're starting to see some of the benefits of those basically older phones that are starting to get upgraded. So that should be a nice tailwind for the next few quarters. So the core engine for Apple is in good shape. On top of that, I'm going to shift gears here, or before I shift gears, talk a little bit about when they will reach a supply-demand equilibrium. And that question came up, and the basic idea is they were supply constrained in September. Are they still going to be supply constrained for the entire December quarter? And Cook said he didn't know. History would suggest that they will get to equilibrium by the end of the December quarter, which means that it's unlikely that we see revenue get pushed from December into March. We'll be keeping a close eye on the lead times. That's an easy way we can see it. If, for example, in the month of December, we see lead times all being 1 day, that's probably a sign that we're at supply-demand equilibrium. But keep in mind, there is not an expectation that we see kind of a big bump up in the March quarter. So that's the pressure point. I'm going to just run through a couple other important topics. One being services up 15% year over year. The street was looking for up 13%. That's in part because their base of active devices continues to grow. They said that reached, as expected, yet a new high. And I think they just continue to add users, and those users end up becoming services users. I noted that they said half of the Mac, iPad, and wearables customers are new to Apple. And so they're still expanding, surprisingly, they're still expanding their base. And when they do that, these people buy multiple hardware products and they buy services. And we're seeing that in just this incredible stability over the years in the services business. So typically about 20% of revenue, and that just continues to be a really steady growing. And then the final piece, just in terms of what's going on related to AI, Cook said they expect the new Siri out next year. The expectation is it's going to be early next year. He didn't define early. He just said next year. The specific expectation is that it's going to be out late in March. And my belief is it probably is going to be more like late in April. I could see them reporting their January or their December quarter sometime their March quarter sometime late in April, and use that as kind of a springboard to talk about the new Siri. But either way, it's coming. And I think it's really important that the bar is just so low when it comes to Apple and AI. We've been so disappointed. And I think there's only one direction that the psychology around the stock can go in the months to come in anticipation of this, and this is up. I think that the multiple in Apple will expand in anticipation of whatever we see from Siri. That is a really high bar they've thrown out there. And I expect investors to get progressively excited about them delivering on that high bar. So putting all this together, fundamentals are strong. They've got a big new upgrade coming with Apple Intelligence, potentially a foldable phone in the back half of next year. And I think the elements of all of this are positive for shares of Apple going into the end of the year. On behalf of Pressure Points, I'm Gene. Bye for now.